Charging. Clear. Do it again. Charging. Clear. Okay, we've got a pulse.
I was 16 years of age. I came in with hope and optimism, and I said, hi, I'd like to apply for a job. And you know what they told me at the front counter? I said, I'm sorry, we're not hiring. Restaurants used to say that. Not hiring. I went home and I told my dad, Dad, you got to buy me a car. They're not hiring at the Baskin-Robbins. Well, if you laugh, that's because you had a dad like mine. You knew that wasn't going to fly. See, Dad saw that as a learning opportunity. Decided it was time we had a little talk. Turned out to be more of a shared monologue. He dismissed my 4 sisters. I was his only son. And he began to recount his own childhood. He grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was the height of the Depression. The textile mills had closed down in town. There simply weren't enough jobs. His father had passed away from a stroke. He was being raised by a single mother. There wasn't enough food on the table. My dad had to drop out of school in 10th grade just to try to find odd jobs to help the family survive. By the time he hit the golden age of 18, he knew there was a better place to live than Raleigh, North Carolina, and he'd heard about this magical land called Chicago, Illinois. He'd never seen it. He'd seen one movie that was set in Chicago, and he said, that's the place I want to move. So he sold all his worldly possessions, and he bought a one-way bus ticket. Took him 3 days on that bus. I can imagine how he felt at 18 years of age on this adventure of his lifetime. And he stepped off that intersection, expecting to find hope and opportunity. It was January 21st, 1939. And he felt the cold wind whipping off Lake Michigan. He just had a little light jacket on his back. He had a nickel in his pocket. That's all he had. Instead of finding hope and opportunity, he saw people huddled around trash cans, had been set on fire trying to keep their hands warm. Other people lined up in bread lines. And any mention of a job drew 10, 20, 30 times as many applicants as there were positions available. Sometimes there were hundreds lined up for one job. My dad had to learn to distinguish himself just to survive. And the fact that Baskin-Robbins wasn't hiring back in 1973 was not going to be a deterrent to me working there. You see, he said, if I want to work at Baskin-Robbins, I had to distinguish myself from other candidates. And then I made a fatal mistake. I said, how am I going to do that? Launched him into about another 2 hours. He said I had to learn about Baskin-Robbins. I couldn't go in there if I was just bored. I had to learn about the process of making ice cream. I had to learn who owned that particular Baskin-Robbins. I had to go in and solve problems. He said that's the only reason they're going to hire you is if you're able to solve problems for them. So you got to learn about the business and distinguish yourself from other candidates. I did my homework. 3 days later, I walked in. I asked for Mr. Alvin Robertson. Mr. Robertson was the franchise owner of the Baskin-Robbins in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. Mr. Robinson came to the front counter. I said, hello, Mr. Robinson. My name is Eric Chester. I'm here to scoop ice cream for you to delight your customers and improve your profits. He took a step back, and that was 1973. He handed me an application. Perhaps he thought I was going to go home, but I was ready. I had brought my pen and a clipboard. I sat down and I began to fill out that application, every single blank in its entirety. By the time it was done, it was a masterpiece. I handed it back to Mr. Robinson. It's Mr. Robertson. May I have an interview, sir? He looked over the application. He said, well, what time do you get out of school? I said, 3 o'clock. Why don't you come in tomorrow around 4? I was there at 3:45 because my dad said, if you're on time, you're 15 minutes late. And I showed up wearing a tie to work at Baskin-Robbins. And I came alone. I did not bring my posse. He was impressed. He invited me back to his office. It was nothing more than a little storage area with a table and 2 chairs next to the freezer. And I stood until Mr. Robertson asked me to sit. And I sat down, and my dad's words were echoing inside my head, don't let your shoulder blades touch the back of that chair. So I leaned forward, and I began to answer all his questions, just like my dad had said, with complete enthusiastic responses. Yes, Mr. Robertson. No, Mr. Robertson. Absolutely, Mr. Robertson. I am your man, Mr. Robertson. And that's just when he asked me where I lived. He was impressed. I moved in for the kill because I had memorized all 31 flavors. Alphabetically. I knew more about ice cream than he did. So I put the clothes. I said, Mr. Robertson, if I'm going to scoop ice cream for you, delight your customers and improve your profits, I need to be on your schedule. When do I start, sir? He spun his chair around, he grabbed the schedule off the back wall, pulled a pin out and said, can you come in tomorrow? I went home and I told my mom, she baked me a celebration meal. She picked up the phone, she called my father, who came home 20 minutes early from work. He had never left work early before. He wouldn't miss work for any kind of athletic event I was in, nothing. But the fact that I had been hired was enough reason to come home. He met me in the driveway. He was so excited, he picked me up like a sack of potatoes, twirled me around, patted me on the back, said, that's a chip off the old block, son. And then he said, if you get fired, you better not come home.